Salve, amigos da Australian Lifestyle! Estamos de volta e dessa vez com um estilo de vida diferente, cara. Na verdade, nem tanto, né, Vini? O Euan McMilan, nosso convidado, trabalha em Perth, uma universidade de lá. O Vinícius vai fazer a introdução aqui para vocês. Mas esse programa, cara, pela primeira vez na história do Australian Lifestyle, vai ser feito em inglês. Então, prepare-se você também, porque dá até para praticar o inglês, né, Vini?
É isso aí, ó. Primeira aula de inglês gratuita aqui nos nossos canais, com um convidado muito especial, um grande amigo. Euan, welcome to the Australian Lifestyle. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Bom dia, Australia. Boa noite, Brasil. Well, I guess that's the extent of my Portuguese.
Well,
right there.
Yeah, Euan is married to a Brazilian journalist and knows a little bit of Portuguese, right, Euan?
Well, that's it. That's all I know. I'm finished.
That's good enough.
You know, actually, it's funny. In Brazil, when you're there, if you're like a gringo, if you're a white guy and you're there and you try to speak Portuguese, I feel like the Brazilians have to be the most complimentary people on the planet if you try and speak their language. Like you could say one Portuguese word and you could say it wrong, and the Brazilians would be like, "Oh no, fala bem, né? Legal, fala bem, no." Yeah. So yeah, you're complimentary when people try to speak your language, which actually is very good when you're shit at it. So yeah.
Well, I like your accent though. Like, yeah, I think you've got a pretty good accent.
The same thing. Fala bem. Tá falando bem.
Yeah.
But Euan, tell us how you met your wife. And you're from Scotland. She's from Brazil. And you both live in Australia. How come? It's an international family in an international setting, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I met Raquel in Australia. So we both worked at Curtin University back in like 2015 would be when we met. And yeah, she was there. She was actually working for University of São Paulo in Ribeirão Preto, where she's from, and she was seconded to Curtin Uni. And then I was just working there. I'd been in Australia since 2010. And then we met. I think I put it down to her not really understanding what I was saying for the first wee while, which was how I managed to convince her to go on a date with me, you know. I think she tells people she thought I was exotic, which is something I'd never been called before, you know. It's rare for like a white Scottish guy to be considered exotic, you know.
Yeah, go for it, Vini.
Yeah, but why did you decide to come to Australia? You know, how did you end up here, you know, at first?
Like, my story is like not really unique, I don't think, particularly from people from like the UK, for example. But I was a backpacker, you know. So like I finished my university, my bachelor degree in 2009. Like in UK, it was like the credit crisis, like the GFC. So there was there was lots of people getting made redundant. There wasn't a lot of jobs going around. And so it was like shit time to finish uni and trying to find a job. So, you know, I just at that point was like, yeah, I'd wanted to go traveling for a long time. So like I kind of just sold my stuff and then got like a little pot of money and caught a flight to Beijing. And then I just kind of made my way by like train and stuff down to Singapore and then flew to Brisbane. And like, if you're from the UK, I mean, you're from a bunch of places, but UK is one of them. You can get a working holiday visa in Australia.
That's a good point. That's the visa that you came with,
yeah.
Right? Like you had a working holiday visa. And Tiago, this is quite interesting because just recently, this work and holiday visa has also been available for Brazilians.
Is that right?
There are 500 places for Brazilians on a work and holiday visa, and that's quite new, you know. So I'll just say that in Portuguese because I think it's super interesting. Então, Tiagão, tem 500 vagas de vistos de working holiday, que essencialmente é um visto para você trabalhar e viajar aqui na Austrália, né? Tem algumas exigências específicas para brasileiros, né? Então, precisa já ter um inglês intermediário, precisa ter feito ou estar estudando um curso universitário. E, assim, com essas... alcançadas essas exigências, a pessoa pode solicitar esse visto, é um visto de 1 ano, que você pode simplesmente vir para a Austrália para trabalhar. É bem interessante. And this was the visa that you originally came to Australia with, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Pô, Vini, eu achei que isso fosse só para europeu, cara.
Não, agora está disponível para brasileiro também, né? Os números são limitados, então é bem competitivo, né? E aí muitas pessoas acabam optando por vir como estudante ao invés de working holiday, porque aí não tem nenhuma limitação no número de vistos, mas está disponível para brasileiro também.
Legal, it's a very good news, Euan. I thought it was only for European citizens.
Yeah, I think I think it's in Australia they've been extending it like bit by bit to new nationalities for a long time. So I know, like, you know, there was limited places from Peru and Chile as well, and then obviously now they've extended it to Brazil. So that's great news. Yeah, it's really great news because it's an interesting visa, right? So you get a year, but then you have to spend like 3 months of that year. If you want to apply for a second one, you have to spend 3 months of that year in a regional area. So it forces you to kind of go out into like places you would never really go and work doing something that, you know, like is kind of like beneficial for the Australian economy, you know? So most people, they go and do like fruit picking or agriculture, or they work in, you know, construction in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, and a lot of these little towns in outback Australia, they really kind of like, they survive off like backpackers coming in and doing that agricultural work. So like you can imagine during COVID, there was like this big issue because they didn't have anyone to do like the kind of fruit picking work, you know? Yeah. So I went to Kununurra, which is in like the northeast of Western Australia. It's like in a region called the Kimberley. Yeah, it was an incredible experience. Yeah, so I ended up spending like 6 months up there instead of 3, working on a diamond mine, actually.
Wow.
All right, okay. And what were you doing there?
Yeah, I just went in as like, you know, like unskilled laborer. They call it trade assistant. So you're like an assistant to a tradesperson. But the deal was you had to do 90 days and then you were allowed an extra year. You could apply for another year visa back in those days. So I ended up doing longer though, because I had a good job. You know, this is the mad thing about it, right? So like when I was in the cities, when I was in Sydney and like, I was in Sydney for like 6 months, Brisbane for like 4, you know, I was getting like nothing. I think I was getting paid like $150 a day for 10 hours work, something like that. You know, I went up to the mines. I went up to Kununurra, I got a job in the mine. I was working like 12-hour days on a mine site. So they're feeding you, they're accommodating you for 2 weeks, and they're paying you like $37 an hour. They were paying me $37 an hour. Wow. For just like no unskilled labor, you know? And that was 13 years ago. So it was like a big jump up. Like all of a sudden, you know, from, you know, scraping by, paying the backpacker place, buying, you know, eating noodles, having like steak once a week or something like that. All of a sudden you're like,
you became a millionaire.
Yeah, man. You know, I always remember I came back to town one day when I was working in the mines during that period, and I went into the bank, and the bank lady pulled me aside and she's like, sir, you have a large amount of money in your current account, and I think perhaps you should consider a savings account for this money. And I was like, what? I was like, when did this happen, man?
Mining is the probably number 1 industry in Australia, right? And here in Western Australia, it's the epicenter of mining in Australia.
Wow.
And there are a lot of jobs like that people travel to the mines. They call FIFO, right? Like, so you work 2 weeks in the mine and then you come back to Perth and leave for 2 weeks, you know, without working, and then you go back to the mines. And there is a lot of money in these jobs, as Euan has just described.
Yeah, but you know, it's not a fulfilling job, right? I think working in the mine, just thinking about it. Is that why you came to work with education, going to the university. I heard that, how could, let's say, tourists coming from Brazil, for example, study in an Australian university, what kind of opportunities do they have to be, successful here in Australia?
Yeah. I mean, look, Tiago, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, the mining work, it pays well for a reason, right? You do like 12-hour days, you're away on a mine site for, whatever length your swing is, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You're away from your family, away from your friends, and you're working very hard for that period of time, right? So you're getting paid more money because it's like a kind of not a great lifestyle, you know what I mean? I was the kind of bottom guy, like, I was getting paid well, but I was, like, unskilled laborer. It wasn't anything to do with what I'd studied at university, so there wasn't really much of a future in it for me, unless I wanted to just be happy at that level, So that's why, I moved to Perth. And then when I was became serious about staying in Australia, I started trying to get more permanent, more sort of like ongoing roles. And that's how I ended up in education. But I mean, for people coming into Australia, I mean, Australia's system that it's set up, while it can be kind of brutal, it's actually very clever, like they basically use education and use like a skills, the skills that they need, like a system to choose the people that they want in the country, like long term. So, you can come as a working holiday, you can come as a tourist, stay for a short period. But if you want to stay for any length of time, you really have to have the skills that Australia wants. And that's how you then transition to this kind of like, these more permanent visas, right? A lot of these roles that Australia is looking for, they are professional. They're ones that you get into through education, so like engineering, for example, or nursing or medicine, medical sciences, these types of things. So all of these types of skills you kind of require formal education to get into, and that's the part that the universities play.
Information technology as well is another big one. Accounting, that leads a lot of people into obtaining permanent residency in Australia. And Murdoch University, Tiago, plays an important role because it's a university that is quite flexible in its entry requirements, I would say. Like it's they're very comprehensive. They price themselves competitively, with the other universities as well. So it is a very good option for Brazilian students. And obviously it's not very far from the CBD of Perth. So like they have a train station that it's very close to the university, so you can easily access the campus. As a matter of fact, they're building a very interesting new facility at Murdoch, right? Tell us a little bit more, Euan, about what's happening at Murdoch University.
So we're building a new building. It's like enormous. I say a building, but it looks like a kind of like a airport terminal.
Wow.
Yeah, Vini's coming to see it today, I think. So
yeah, that's right. We're gonna have some images here, for the new building.
So it opens like 14th of February, so in time for like the start of semester 1 this year. But like we're gonna get a tour of it today. So Vini's gonna put his hard hat on and his jacket and come into the building site. There's two things taking place at Murdoch, right? It's like this building is more than just a physical construction project, which we do. It is a space for learning, but it's also like a revision of the IT infrastructure that the university has. So this building's designed with these smart classrooms that allow students to take part in the class, both like in person physically, but if they're online. COVID changed things, right? For education, COVID changed things a lot. Universities, particularly, I think in the Anglophone countries like Australia, UK, US, they realized that they had to offer a better online service than they currently were, because it's the way the world's moving. So this hybrid model is going to be key, I think, over the next decade in education in this part of the world.
I heard that you guys on this new building, you were always building a space for gamers, for esports. How big is that for Murdoch University?
Yeah, look, so we've had a major within our Bachelor of Arts for some time around esports.
All right.
So like students can actually take it as a subject as part of their degree. And we currently have an esports club at the university. We have an esports. It's a room, you know. The intention was to build an esports stadium, but
wow.
I think the way things are moving, like you know, I don't know. I think Murdoch's a bit unsure about whether or not an esports stadium is really the right way to go, because people are watching esports events virtually. You know what I mean? So yeah. So anyway, yeah, there is an esports facility at Murdoch, and it is an interesting area. It's one that we're also doing research in as well, and they're thinking about adding it to the sports scholarship program as well. So offering like esports, like people who are very good at esports, they can apply for the sports scholarship at Murdoch University. So yeah, it's an interesting space. And one Murdoch's probably the main institution in WA that's sort of really looking at it seriously at the moment. Yeah.
And Tiago, you know, you're studying sustainability, you know, like doing your PhD, and I think you would be quite inspired by this building as well, because it's built with sustainability, you know, as one of the main purpose of the building, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's got a 6-star rating. The construction of the building itself. I guess it's kind of designed to speak to the sort of like values of Murdoch University in general, right? So like Murdoch University is one of the ones that kind of is very focused on like the environment, sustainability, but also like the appreciation of its Indigenous heritage. So the site that Murdoch University is built on has been like has been a place of kind of learning for the Indigenous people in the region, which are the Whadjuk Noongar people, specifically for the South Street campus, and the Binjar and Jarab Noongar people in Mandurah. And so like what they're trying to do is continue that kind of that ethos through this building. So 6-star sustainability rating, the entire roof's covered in solar panels. The whole building has been built, the structure of it is wood, rather than you know, metal or concrete. Obviously the elevator shafts are concrete, and the foundations are concrete because they have to be, but and it's been designed in such a way to allow airflow through it as well, so we don't have to use power and electricity to air condition the entire facility. So yeah, I mean, it is a really interesting piece of you know, design and construction work, and there's plenty of videos online if people want to go and have a look at it. It's called Bula Katajan. So Bula Katajan is is basically a Noongar, in the Noongar language would mean like lots of learning would be a lot of learning would be the kind of English translation of that.
It is amazing, and I pay respect to that, because I think it's really an honorable side of Australian culture to pay respect to Indigenous people, the original owners of the land, because that's something we miss in Brazil, right? Maybe things are changing now with the new government, but yeah, we should look at that knowledge, right? Because it's completely different from the Western knowledge that we know. What other part of the Australian lifestyle attracts you, Euan?
Australian lifestyle is one thing, but I think every place in Australia you could have like, it could have its own individual consideration of lifestyle. You know, like I kind of lived in Brisbane, lived in Sydney, Melbourne for a while, in the Kimberley in the north, and then in Perth for the most of the time. You know, like Perth, I think out of all the places from my perspective is the one that I've kind of found the most affinity with and love the most. The lifestyle here is fantastic. The work-life balance as well. So, you know, people get paid proportionally well here. I think like lots of like students, when they come here, international students, they'll pick up jobs like cleaning, like, you know, working in shops. And if they can get enough hours, then they can live quite comfortably on those types of roles as a student, as those types of jobs as a student. Whereas, you know, if you think of the UK or Brazil, for example, that might not be the case.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the good thing is that everyone can, you know, have an ice cream during the weekend, go to the beach, enjoy their lives. I think Euan has described perfectly, you know, work-life balance. It's very important. It's a very evident characteristic of what we see here in the Australian lifestyle.
Yeah. I think as well, Australia, you know, the government services provide quite a lot of stuff for, like, not for free, but it's like it's part of your taxes, right? So, you know, like if you go to Cottesloe Beach in the morning, there's a shark net there, right? So there's a shark net set up. You can swim in the ocean. You know, no, you're not paying to swim in the ocean. You're not paying to swim in the shark net, for example. You know, like parks. You go to parks here in Australia, and you more or less all of them will have barbecues set up where the gas is there, it's provided. You just rock up, bring your stuff, cook your food, and then make sure you clean it afterwards, and that's it. You know, that costs you nothing.
It's interesting that public space is an extension of your house.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of your home. That's the concept here, I would say. And you're absolutely right, Euan. I think the public barbecues are such an important icon to describe, you know, what Australia is all about. You know, like it's got all like this quality of living available to almost everyone. So you go to the beach and you've got a free barbecue to cook your meats, you know. You just clean afterwards, and
not only that,
person can use it.
Not only that, you got showers, you got bathrooms, you got everything you need, you know, to live a happy life. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Euan was talking about the nets in Cottesloe. Cottesloe is probably the most iconic city beach here in Perth. And Euan is actually a very good swimmer, Tiago. He made the Scottish team. We've been swimming together, but I cannot keep up with him.
Yeah, Vini gets me over the short distances, you know, like, but I get him over the longer ones, you know.
Well, we're talking about amazing things here, you know, the Australian lifestyle, you know, the public facilities, the weather, the amazing universities Australian has, the visa opportunities. We're talking about a lot of positive things, but I think there is a specific challenge that I also believe it's fair to talk about, which is accommodation. Is an issue that a lot of international students are facing. You know, it has been a little bit harder than it was in the past to find accommodation. How are you guys addressing that at Murdoch University? I believe you have your own students accommodation on campus, right?
Yeah, correct, Vinny. Yeah, so we've got on-campus accommodation. There is still vacancies for the first semester this year, but they are filling up fast. I mean, look, you're right, Vinny. It is a problem, and it's not unique to Western Australia or Australia even. You know, my father's is a professor at Glasgow University, and they dealt with this just semester. In August there, you know, like students arriving, didn't have accommodation, couldn't find accommodation. We have a similar number of students now as we did pre-pandemic, but we didn't have these problems. But for whatever reason, the rental vacancies in Australia and in Perth in general are down. So, you know, like in Murdoch, we obviously are trying our best to accommodate the students on our campus first. And when that fills up, we work with a body called the AHN, Australian Homestay Network. And they work hard to find Australian families, Australian households that, you know, for example, have a room to rent, and then they basically rent those rooms out to international students. All the universities in Perth have also sent out like a general email to all their staff and sort of said, hey, you know, do you want to accommodate an international student? Bring an international student into your home next year. So look, I think I get the feeling that Perth will, you know, it will come together and solve the problem. I just think it might be, you know, at the start of semester 1 in February, the end of February, there might be some teething issues. You know, people might find it a little bit difficult initially when they arrive here to find some accommodation. So, I mean, like any students watching this that are coming to Perth or Australia in general in semester 1, get looking now for accommodation. You know, don't leave it until you arrive. You know, leverage your communities, any friends you've got here to help you find somewhere to stay, because I can't imagine how much more stressful it'll add to already a stressful thing. Coming to a new country is a stressful experience if you don't have somewhere to live sorted. So don't leave it to the last minute.
That's fantastic, Euan. I think we did well, Tiago, for our first guest in English, huh?
For sure, yeah. I couldn't understand everything you said, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah,
for being our first interviewee in English. That was awesome, Vini.
Very good. Muito legal. O Euan é uma figuraça, um cara muito querido aqui na comunidade brasileira, casado com a Raquel, que é uma jornalista que também mora aqui em Perth. E, enfim, tivemos muita sorte de tê-lo aqui hoje conosco, Tiagão.
Com certeza, maravilha. Pô, obrigado então, Vini. Obrigado a todos vocês que estão aqui nos assistindo. E a gente volta numa próxima em inglês ou português. Vai saber, né, Vini?
Vai saber, estamos aqui.
Obrigado, Australian Lifestyle. Até a próxima.
Obrigado, gente. Tchau.